this was the kind of a rough order of
Yes.
things. Yes, a rough order of things that have come up this past semester in the fall 2020 semester. I want to talk about assessments and some things that we can do. And I've referred to some of the work that our colleagues have done in the past because it worked then and it would work for us now. We just have to implement some things. Honor lock has been a huge issue this semester. Also student accommodations and making sure that we're respecting those while also maintaining academic integrity. I would like to review reporting, but mostly I'm going to send a copy of this to Jill, this slideshow to Jill, so that it can be maybe a link wherever the recording is housed, so that if you need kind of to walk through the reporting process, it'll be there for you. So we had 90 reported academic integrity violations during the fall semester. And for reference, I think we had about 36 during the same time period in 2019. So we're up about almost 3 times as many, and I want to emphasize reported, because we don't know if instructors are reporting more, students are cheating more, or the evidence is just more apparent and it makes it easier for instructors to file those reports. But either way that we cut it, we've had about a 3 times increase, which means that we have to adjust the way that we're doing assessments. And I've just kind of wanted to share some of the things that have come up. And also Dr. Bork is with us. I think in 2004, Dr. Bork added, during her time on the AIC, wrote some kind of guidelines and helpful hints for us. And a lot of those things are still relevant. And I've linked to that. One of the last pages in this slideshow is a resource page. And I've linked directly to that PDF because it's got some of these bullet points a lot more fleshed out. So first, written assignments. One of the easiest things that we can do is to just change assignments between semesters. So if you're using text, and I know this might refer more specifically to those in the English department or social sciences, if there's articles that you love to use, you may have to give them up for a couple semesters. You may have to rotate them out. Or you may need to add additional text in so that you're asking the students to do something that students last semester haven't done. I know this semester last semester, I believe, Professor Voigtman in the English department brought up the idea of Course Hero, and Mercer is on Course Hero. So some of your assignments and your classes might be available to other students. So it's something to be aware of. You can also assign readings in the field, and I'm referring to the English department because that's the department that I work in. I know right now Professor Carmine is looking at kind of what's going on in the landscape right now and what readings are being published literally today or last week that he can add into his English 101 class or 102 class. And in that way, just literally, we haven't given students time to plagiarize. Like the essays that they might want to copy or copy paste just don't exist yet. And so that's a really useful thing for us to do. Another thing that has been useful in classes, and I want to say that Professor Porter in the math department is doing this, is oral presentations as assessment tools. Instead of, open book essays or exams, asking the students to walk you through some of the concepts and demonstrate or prove to you that they actually understand. And if it is an oral presentation that's live, say on Zoom or Collaborate or Teams, then there's not really the opportunity for them to consult other sources because it's kind of the same as them having a conversation with you. Makes sense? Questions, comments, concerns? Also experiences. If you're doing any of this in your class and you want to chime in, that would be wonderful. So as it pertains to testing, if we
Nicole,
could
can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
This is Winston.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm magnificent.
Good.
When you're talking about oral presentations, for those of us who teach technology, we do ask students to do oral presentations as a part of their end of the class assignment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some tools, or do other people on online have some tools that they're using for assessing presentations that work in a virtual environment different than they work in a face-to-face environment? It's just a question. And if somebody thinks about it or sends it to me, I could use. Does that make sense what I'm asking you?
It does. So I didn't put it in the resources for this, and I actually have a resource that I got from Arlene Stinson that's kind of a 40-page PDF. I didn't share it because it's a monster of a document,
Okay.
and I can send that over, and it actually has some kind of specific best practices for evaluating presentations in the online environment.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. You
Absolutely.
can just send it. You can send it to me. I don't care if you pack my mailbox.
I will also, I'll send it to you, but I'll also update this presentation and add it to the resources so that if Jill posts it, it's available for everybody.
Thank you very much.
With pleasure. Okay, so for doing testing, first of all, Blackboard is very useful. Mercer Online, as we heard during our meeting we were just in, is very accommodating and very helpful. And if we're kind of unfamiliar with the tools that are available to us, they can walk us through it. We can have short answer essays. We can ask students to explain processes in writing. We can also ask them to contextualize or apply the material to current events, kind of in writing. So I'm imagining if I'm in one of my classes, I teach a book called The 57 Bus, and it deals with kind of institutional racism in the carceral system. I might ask them to apply the concepts that we've discussed in this book that's written, I think 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 now, and apply them to what they might be seeing or perceiving in the world around them today. I'm not changing necessarily the reading material, but I am asking them to apply it in a way that probably they can't find online right now. And again, we can do live exams. So part of the reason I want to share this presentation is because I've included some links. Blackboard testing, if you're not covering the kind of content that lends itself to written answers, there's also other things that we can do. Question pools are going to be a great resource for you, where you can create your own question pools. And there's such a way, did not get a chance to walk through this with Professor Rose, but you can make it so that each of your students gets an individualized test, because you're utilizing question pools, because you're randomizing the questions and the answers for every single test. And then that way it's more difficult for students to cheat, even with if they're friends with somebody in the class, just because, their 37 isn't the same as somebody else's 37. Or even on the same question, their C, A, B, C, D, if they're choosing, isn't the same as somebody else's. So those things are there. And the link kind of walks you through how to set that up. But again, Mercer Online has been amazing. And Rob in particular is very happy to walk us through that. The other thing is we can time, you can set when you're setting up a test, you can set it up so that the students get their grade right away. You can also set it up so that this Blackboard tells them which answers they got right or wrong, offer them feedback for correct and incorrect answers, but you don't have to do that immediately. You can set that so that the students don't get that feedback until after everyone in the class has taken the test. And that might be just kind of a small, useful precaution that you can take so that students someone's taking it early and then sharing the answer with their friends. And then just as kind of a general precaution, setting up time limits and forced completion is helpful. That way students can't leave the test and come back. That way they have to finish it in one sitting. And I'd also offer that we do have students with accommodations, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail later. But it might be helpful, and I'm all about saving myself labor because I want future Nicole to have a good life. If you go into Blackboard and you set up a group for accommodations, you can just, for all of your tests, add that group to the test and say that group gets double time. And then if you have a student who has accommodations, you just add them to that group. And then that way it kind of saves you work. You do it on the front end when you're setting up your class, as opposed to going into every single test and adding a student. and then having to do that for every student who gives you an accommodation form in every class. So that's just kind of a helpful thing.
Nicole, I just wanted to add from the a lot of the tools in Blackboard, you just want to make sure you don't make every single one available. If you use them all, Blackboard will kind of crash. So, you know, choose a couple. And also when you're doing time limits and things like that, you just want to be cognizant that we, you know, we all are all in a pandemic, and some of our students don't have great access to computers and bandwidth and internet. So if they're having difficulty with their internet and there's a time limit, they could time out and not really have had a chance to take the test.
And so Jill brings up an excellent point. The kind of motto that I've had for myself just as an instructor during the pandemic is grace. I'm trying to be allow as much grace as I can with my students while still maintaining academic rigor. If a student, you know, says my computer cut out or my internet cut out, I can just go into Blackboard and check to see how long they were in, and that's not really a hardship for me. And then I can make the judgment call whether or not I'm going to reopen the assessment tool for the student or not. But then that also comes in handy if you haven't allowed the answers to go out into the world. That's a useful thing, because now if you're extending the time, that student doesn't have a potential advantage over other students who took it earlier in the week or earlier in the unit. And Diane is in the chat is asking about workshops for these tools, and Jill is saying there are more sessions tomorrow and more sessions in the future.
Yeah, we do have sessions 1 to 4. They're all half-hour. I'm not sure if this will exactly be covered. I'm going to take a look, but I will definitely bring this to Mercer Online's attention.
All right. So another thing that works, and I'm not sure why it works because I'm a poet and not a psych professor, is affirmative academic integrity statements have been proven to work. So if we ask students to affirm that they will not cheat in a given class or on a given assessment tool for whatever reason, perhaps it's just reminding them that, you know, we're watching or that we're aware that they might, it tends to bring down the incidences of academic dishonesty. So this statement is from Ken Howarth, which is in his syllabus, which he shared with the AI. He was kind enough to share with the AIC. And essentially, this is kind of like the last paragraph in a 3 or 4 paragraph chunk that says, hey, this is what academic integrity is in our class. I expect you to cite. If you're in doubt, I still expect you to cite. These are my standards, and you need to, I believe he asked students to email him back saying, I understood the pledge that was in the syllabus and I agreed to adhere to it. And then at the top of all of his written assignments, the student, and this is the bolded part, literally types the word pledged and then their name. And I guess in the face-to-face classes when we were on campus would sign it. And that's for every written assignment. The student has to say, no, I'm aware and I will do this. Doesn't mean that they can't, you know, they're capable of copy pasting even if they've done this. But it's just one more thing that kind of does 2 things. One, it reminds them that we are aware and that we are being mindful of upholding those academic integrity standards. And also, if it gets to the point where the student does violate academic integrity and it goes to the AIC, the student can't say that they were unaware of the standards, which is an argument that we hear from students a lot, especially when they're appealing, that I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So that's a statement. What I do, I pulled this from one of my Blackboard classes. Before students can access anything in my classes, they take essentially what amounts to a 1-question quiz, because that's the only way I could set it up, that says, and I included it, that they essentially understand Mercer's academic integrity policy, they understand the English department's honor code, and they agree to follow it. True or false? When they hit true through the power of the internet and specifically adaptive release, then they can move on to the work in the class. And that's actually been a really helpful thing, because sometimes students will say, I'm not sure what this is. And then we can have a conversation in the discussion board or via email. And at least the student is aware, like, no, even if you did, I told you to read the syllabus, but even if you didn't read the syllabus, you have to encounter this policy somewhere before you can get to the actual coursework. And that's been helpful in terms of having conversations. I think that's it there, unless we have questions or comments. Okay, so we'll move on to honor lock. So at the beginning of last semester, I believe the AIC shared some version of these statements with FCTL, with the academic deans, and with some of the course coordinators. With a sudden shift to honor lock, we had essentially something that just wasn't covered in our course materials. We didn't have we as instructors didn't have policies, and so this was our first initial attempt at policies, kind of at blanket policies. We've learned a couple things since then. I'm gonna go to the next one. So a couple of things that we've learned since then is that policy, it says something about you know, don't read the questions out loud. That might be a little bit ableist. We didn't know. It didn't occur to us. But again, in having open conversation and kind of transparency across the college, Arlene Stinson was able to say and bring to our attention that some students, just as a test taking strategy that they've been taught in the K through 12 system, is to read the questions out loud to themselves. So right now the AIC has it, because we've kind of been inundated with appeals and with violations. We haven't revised this, but I do encourage all of you to revisit your course policy and to think about some of the things that have come up. And so there's a couple questions I'd like that have come up frequently. What do you say to students who don't live alone and who don't really have control whether or not their roommate walks into the living room, or whether their parents walk into the living room, or whether someone comes in the house, or if they have kids? Is that a violation? Is that you get to take the test again? Is it you can't talk to adults, but you might be able to talk to children? I don't necessarily have answers for you, but those are things that have come up because honor lack brings us literally into our students' lives. And school is not the only thing that our students are doing. They have relationships, they have people that they're in contact with, they have other obligations. So if I'm doing this with you all right now and my kid's school calls, I'm answering. You guys are great. I enjoy working with you, but my priority is my child. And if there's any sort of question that my child might not be okay, that's the call I'm going to take. So I can't say that for myself and then hold my students to a different standard. That, for me, that wouldn't be fair. So you might want to think, what happens if a student gets a call that they can't put off? Is it an automatic violation? Is it a, hey, if something happens during a test that can't be avoided, there's some sort of emergency in your home, or you get, you know, a call from your mom, sister, someone who needs your care, you have to email me within, you know, an hour or two so that we can set something up. I can't answer that for you, but I can say that those are the kinds of situations that have come up in AIC.
Yeah, I mean, Ellen just put in the chat that she asked her students to email her if something like that occurred during their test. You know, because yeah, those things are unavoidable.
I'm sorry, I've had like quite a few situations where someone's sister came in asking for a power cord. They had to yell at their dad to shut the door. And I just say, email me. Or I'm like, I'm really, really sorry. I had to run to the bathroom. Like, just let me know up front, you know, and you can't expect things to go perfectly. I had a woman take an exam in her bathroom with her toddler hanging on her shoulder. And that's probably the only area and time she had available to take that test.
Yep.
So, I mean, you have to make accommodations for, you know, the students, you know, living environment they're in.
And, you know, honor lock will, if you state it in your exam, but honor lock's not going to stop a student from taking a test. We don't have that type of a service from honor lock. So unless you tell them to, the student will just continue and it'll be recorded later. So.
And it might be flagged.
Yes,
for
it'll
you
be
to
flagged.
look at it, yeah.
Right, but if you know, or the student tells you, or it looks like, you know, they have a child hanging from their neck, then yeah, that child's not probably helping them with the test.
If your child knows stats, send them to my house. Yeah. And so Diane is asking if when you're viewing the video from honor lock, you can clearly see if someone walks into the room or interrupt and it's by mistake.
Right.
You can. Sometimes, so I will say that I don't use honor lock in my classes, but I have watched so much honor lock footage this semester, so many hours. Like it's like the worst Netflix binge I've ever had.
Not what you want to be watching.
Not what I wanted. Sometimes you can tell that the student does not want to be talking to the person. Like, mom, leave me alone. And sometimes the student is trying to end the conversation, and honor lock might flag that second person in the room, something like that. So the other thing is, honor lock reports alone are not enough. If the honor lock flags the video, you have to watch the video. And I'll talk, I might not, but when you're reporting violations too, if you're going to include honor lock video, we need timestamps, because we get 1.5 hour long exams. And if there are, I want to say we had maybe upwards of 15 appeals this semester. And that might be a conservative estimate. We have to review all the evidence. You're asking your colleagues to watch an 1.5 hour video of your student taking an exam, which is as exciting as it sounds. And so we need timestamps. Tell us what you see, tell us when you saw it, and then that helps us kind of parse the evidence that we're provided with. And Cynthia's saying these systems flag behavior associated with disabilities. Yes, they do. And that's what Arlene was bringing to our attention. Students might need to vocalize in order to help process. Students might be at home and they might need assistance physically, but then that other person comes in the room and now honor lock is flagging it. And Dr. Ladson is saying it's a concern for students we see in counseling as well. I think it's proven, I mean, and Dr. Ladson, please weigh in on this, that taking so far all of the articles that I've read about this, which has been a lot, unfortunately, is that taking the test with the online proctoring is more anxiety producing than taking an in-person test. So the students are going to it upset.
Yes.
Which,
Dr. Ladson, do you want to add something?
Please.
Oh, no, I was saying, yes, you are exactly correct. It is increasing anxiety amongst the students that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. For so many reasons, right? One, we're staring at I personally have a background. Not all of our students do, right? And they may not want you in their home because we're not necessarily their friends. So you're getting maybe a window into their life that they feel uncomfortable about. And there's a lot of documentation online. One of the controversies surrounding honor lock is the invasion of privacy issue. Also, it's someone staring at them for over an hour. It's disconcerting. And so we kind of have to allow for that, which is why the flags are not enough. You have to look at it. Ellen says they need to be fully clothed. Yes, they do. And you might also remind your students, because I won't contextualize this, but you might also want to remind your students that there is a camera there. So if there's anything that they would prefer that their instructor not see, or that honor lock not see, that's something that they don't do.
Right. Lois Owens asked, does the student need a combination form if they want to read questions out loud?
So I can, can I skip forward? Yeah, I can. So here's my say on accommodations. I think in face-to-face classes, our students sometimes have the habit of kind of throwing an accommodation form at us and leaving for whatever reason. That's not really an option now. We have to have a conversation with the student about accommodations, if the student is willing to have that conversation, because if I don't know that you need to vocalize, I am going to think that you're talking to someone else, and telling me after the test is not the appropriate time to have that conversation. And that's something that that's a conversation that the AIC has had with Arlene and with Lisa Ward over at CETA about they are encouraging students to have that conversation with us as instructors, so that we can fully respect the accommodations that they're entitled to and provide them. So in an English class, if I'm teaching about poetry, your use of a calculator has no effect. Okay, you give me a piece of paper that says that you can use a calculator. That means nothing to me in my poetry class. But the idea that you might need to read questions out loud, that's something that I need to know. If you need to access other things, or you need notes, that's something that I need to know before you take the test. Because if taking the test on an online proctoring environment is anxiety inducing, being accused of cheating for using the strategies you've been taught to use for the past 12 years also is anxiety inducing. And then there's not really a good outcome for anyone. Diane is saying, I think the testing center needs to be open this semester for students. I don't disagree, but I also don't know that they have the staffing for that. And so that's a question, above my pay grade.
Yeah, I put that in the chat. Yeah, it's not in our plan. We have to have our plans documented as to what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't do it for the spring.
Mm-hmm. And then Dr. Latson's also citing the kind of cost prohibitive nature of getting the tests that one needs to prove that they need an accommodation.
Yeah. And Cynthia Simon is, making a comment that someone who vocalizes, it may not be a disability. It could just be a learned style, or as Nicole, as you mentioned, something they've learned to do through, elementary and high school to help them get through things.
And Dan is saying that, circling back to that idea of grace, and that there are things that students may do in person that they don't realize are part of a lifetime coping mechanism for an ability difference they don't even fully realize they have, or that never came up. Yeah, things are surfacing that they weren't aware of and that we weren't aware of. Students may not fully understand what they're doing, or perhaps why, because they're faced with a new challenge and they're exhibiting perhaps new behaviors in response to that new challenge, as are we. It's just generally no one's watching us do our job, right? And so that is a useful thing for us to be mindful.
Hey, Nicole?
Yes.
I have a question. I didn't want to put it in chat because I was wondering maybe either you or Jill can answer this. I was wondering, did anybody do like an assessment of, or did a survey of students regarding honor lock? And the reason why I'm asking, I'm the course coordinator for IST 101, and I have been wrestling with whether we're going to use honor lock this semester or not. And my concern is that if it's really stressful to students, maybe I should think twice about using it or not.
Yeah, Terry, I think if we did a survey of the students, I can tell you what they would say. No one would say they want to take a test on honor lock. So if you've made it this far and been satisfied with how it's going, I would say probably not, because in the fall, we ran 10,000 tests on honor lock in over 300 classes and 100 faculty. So you could save your student some stress by not having to have every single one of their classes on honor lock.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And to agree with Jill, I would say that the majority, maybe 80% of the violations that we've had this semester have been because of honor lock. We've had very few instances of copy paste plagiarism, which is kind of, you know, what we get most commonly. And some of it is, and I can also say that we've had, I think this is my third year-ish as AIC chair, we had more AIV withdrawals from instructors than ever. I don't know if I've had more than one a semester before last semester, but one of the things that's happening is, and this goes back to communication, it's always disconcerting for students when they find out that they have they have a violation from me. And that's happened a lot this semester, in part because, you know, it's a little bit different to grab somebody after class and say, hey, I need to talk to you about something, when the class is Zoom and the student just hits end meeting or leave meeting before you have a chance to grab them, and they may not be checking their student email. And so what has happened on a number of occasions is a behavior such as those that we've been talking about have been flagged by honor lock. The instructor has said, well, you know, they're unfamiliar with the limitations of honor lock because we're all learning. And then they filed the report, and then in sitting down, after the student got an email from me and then ended up talking to their instructor. Then the student and the instructor spoke, and then the violation was withdrawn. And in my ideal world, the student and instructor speak before it ever reaches the filling out the violation form, so that there's a clear understanding on both sides of, you know, what is the perceived violation and what is kind of the answer to that. And if the student can't answer, absolutely file the report, not saying don't. However, it's helpful to have some context. And I also, this is just really short, I just wanted to share with you, which is kind of depressing. But if you Google how to cheat on online exams, there are a lot of how-to videos. So when you're revising your policies for this semester, that's something that you might want to be aware of too. If you're using honor lock because you think, or you know, that this is the way to have secure testing, it's not. It's just one more thing that can be gotten around, right? So maybe an answer to your question, Terry, like, is there another assessment tool that is, you know, less, that is more difficult to be dishonest on? And that goes back to some of the suggestions I pulled from Carol's worksheet on plagiarism proof or academic integrity proof assignments. And that might be something to think about when we're designing or tweaking our classes. And it looks like Lois has a question about cell phones, which I'll get to in one second. Jackie, Jackie's pointing out the how to cheat. Yep. And Shannon is saying, I think we should maintain an online testing environment that most closely mimics testing in the classroom. They would not be allowed a cell phone in the class. Yes. So there's a couple just specifically about cell phones and watch and smartwatches. One of the things that your policy should address if you are using either honor lock or you're doing live exams via Zooms or Collaborate or Teams is, what do you want people to do with their secondary devices? Some of the policies, because I've gotten a chance to read them from across the college in as I've carried out kind of the duties on AIC, is you can't have them at all. And some instructors want the student to kind of, as a part of their room scan, show them putting the phone and the watch and the iPad or whatever into a drawer and closing that drawer and then coming back. Like, that's part of the room scan. That's up to you, how you want to enforce that. I would say that if I'm on mute, I can ask Siri for any answer I want and probably get something that's good enough to pass a test. So you might want to think about that when you're crafting your own policy.
Yep, if there's a will, there's a way.
It really is. And that's also why some of the policy examples that I shared, no earbuds in, because they can, you know, be talking to someone else. And there's certain things that you just require you to watch the video in order to kind of parse out what is actually happening. Is the student looking at a piece of paper and writing down notes? Is the student looking at a phone? Surprisingly, glasses have gotten a lot of students in trouble because we can see the reflection of the secondary device they're using to the side of the phone, to the side. And if not, it would look like they were taking notes, but we can literally see the reflection in their glasses. So, and that is one of the tips that is going around on YouTube, is take off your glasses or turn down the brightness on your device to kind of avoid that.
Right.
So you have to make kind of those decisions on your own.
Yeah, and the one thing that we will continue to have this semester from Honor Lock is the review from their proctors. That will not continue forever, but it will continue this semester. So they are reviewing it, and they do not send the report out until 2 days after your test ends. So if a student takes the test on Tuesday, but they have till Thursday, the report won't come out until 2 days after Thursday.
That's really helpful to know.
So yes, so because a lot of faculty are asking Honor Lock for the report after that student, and then they're going to wait until the whole test is done.
All right. So one of the last things I wanted to talk about was reporting, and I'm not going to go over this in detail. If you believe there's been a violation after you've done your due diligence of reviewing the video and/or talking to the student, please report it. It's not a useful thing for us to underreport. It doesn't help anybody. You're not actually doing the student a favor. Mercer is very forgiving in our academic integrity policies. The students are not penalized. They're not, they are penalized, but it's not punitive, right? So, and I'm not going to read this to you because you can read, but when the process starts and the student comes to AIC for a first violation, it's always what the instructor imposes. So whatever you impose in your classroom is the punishment that the student gets. And most often that's failing the assessment tool or failing the course. Or some students, some teachers will say, you can't get above a C in the class or something like that. As long as it's written clearly in your syllabus, then that's what you should enforce, which is to say you should have whatever the consequence is written in your syllabus so that you can refer to it, because the student has a right to know what the consequences are. For second violations, the AIC has the right to impose additional penalties. And maybe at a future session, I can share what those penalties are. It's a pretty straightforward chart. I just don't have it handy. And for almost everything, there's kind of a soft penalty and a hard penalty. And the kind of escalation is an intervention. We invite the student to a meeting of the AIC. We say, hey, this is what happened. Do you understand where you went astray? Here are the resources that are available to you. We have success coaches, we have mentors, we have a counseling center. Like, we assume that you made a bad choice, but that isn't necessarily indicative of kind of who you are as a person. And we want to give you the opportunity to make different choices in the future. We also acknowledge that most of the time students end up cheating. It's a time management issue, which is why the success coaches are particularly helpful. We also may require that they attend not tutoring, but the kind of anti-plagiarism sessions, that the workshops that the tutoring center offers. So our kind of approach to it is very much, hey, let's do some course correction, as opposed to this is the worst thing you could have possibly done, and now we're going to kind of tank the rest of your academic career. One thing that we do in the service of that is to highlight the difference between Mercer's philosophy and perhaps neighboring schools that they might be thinking about going to. So we have pulled Rutgers academic integrity policy, we pulled Rowan, we pulled Princeton, we pulled kind of geographically proximal institutions, and we've also pulled from institutions that might be aspirational, and shared with the student, hey, you did this at Mercer, we're requiring you to talk to a success coach and to come talk to us. At other institutions, this is what would happen to you. But our goal is to help you to be a successful student at Mercer and also beyond. And so that's why we're taking the approach that we take. They might, if they keep repeating offenses, it is, they can have a half-load probation, they can be suspended, And then after that, there might be a notation on their transcript. So kind of the notation on the transcript is a last ditch effort for to get them to change their behavior. And I'm going to kind of fly through these. These are just where you can find the forms. You go to IMLink, Academic Affairs, Academic Integrity Committee, and then the violation report, it comes directly to me. This is what the form looks like. It's all really basic information. I do ask that you don't speed through it, in part because we're trying to collect data so that we can kind of get an idea of, is there a particular semester? I mean, our instinct might say students are more likely to cheat in the shorter semesters because they're shorter and the students have less time, but we can't prove that. And so we're trying to do some tracking of what's going on. So please be mindful when you're filling that out. Also, the students have rights. And so there's a timeline associated with this process. So we ask for dates of discovery or date of an incident so that we can make sure that the students' rights are protected as well. If you're including an honor lock video or any sort of large file, we ask for links to your OneDrive or your, I think, what's it called? SharePoint. You know, Mercer's version of Google. Yeah, OneDrive or SharePoint, so that we can access, so that we can view it without having to download it, because that's a little bit cumbersome for us as ASM members. We also ask that you make sure that the settings allow us to see it. A lot of times we get dead links and it just kind of prolongs the process. And if a student, at the point at which we're reviewing evidence, the student has appealed and the student is kind of waiting on that answer. And so every time we have to send emails back and forth to get access or to get timestamps, it's just kind of delaying the answer we can give to the student. And it also is creating, you know, more in your inbox, which I'm sure is not great for you all. It's not wonderful for me when I'm trying to teach during the semester and there's, you know, things that are taking 4 or 5 emails that when it could take 1. You can, there's a place for you to attach PDFs. And we also ask what consequence you imposed, which should be aligned with your syllabus. And if you've had the misfortune of filing an academic integrity violation report this semester, you know that as quickly as I possibly can, I will send the student email and CC you and say, hey, the AIC has been notified that during this semester in this class, you did this thing. And here's the list of the evidence that the instructor has provided. Here is what is going to happen, which is the penalty if it's assuming it's a first offense, the penalty that the instructor has imposed. We think of it as a learning opportunity. Here's my contact information. Please get back to me. And if you file the report, you get a copy of all of that, just so that you know that it's not kind of like out there in the ether. Had a thought and it disappeared. That's disappointing. So about evidence, and this is maybe the last thing that I will say. If you're going to share evidence with the AIC, be mindful that we have to follow the process that's laid out in the student handbook. And that process says that we can share evidence with the student at the full hearing, which is to say the student, I can't, if you give me evidence, I can't give it to the student. I also don't know in terms of giving the evidence to the student, if that will compromise the integrity of one of the assessment tools in your class. I don't know, I'm not in your classroom. So if you're going to share evidence with the AIC, the student might want to see it and they often have come to me and say, can I have this evidence? And I have to say, I will share that evidence with you at the point during a full hearing. That nothing prevents you from sharing the evidence with your students though. And in fact, I would encourage it because it demystifies the process. It gives you a chance to have a conversation, which may clear up misunderstandings on either side in terms of, oh, this wasn't a violation, or, oh, I totally see what I did wrong and I will not do that in the future. And also, the AIC doesn't necessarily need to be an arbiter between the relationship that you have with your students, right? Like so much of what we do is built on rapport and our ability to effectively communicate with students. And sharing that and being transparent in that way builds that. So I would just kind of highlight that I cannot share the evidence that you give to me with your students until we get to a full hearing, because I'm bound by the processes in the student handbook. So please think about whether or not you're willing to share that evidence with them. And that kind of jazz hands concludes all the things I needed to say, but I know some of you chimed in and asked questions during and in the chat, but we have 6 or 7 minutes if there's anything that I didn't get to or that was unclear. Or we could all take a bathroom break and grab some water before the 1 o'clock session. It's entirely up to you.
This is pretty good. This is Alvin Haywood calling. This was very, very good. In matter of fact, because I had some real concerns about honor lock. So you addressed them, both you and Jill. So thank you very much.
Great, Alvin. Always good to hear from you.
Bless you.
Yep. Yeah, I want to echo that this was so helpful because this has been an ongoing concern for nursing faculty too, regarding using honor lock and some of the issues that we've had with some students. You mentioned about trying to like timestamp the videos, which I think is absolutely essential for you guys because there's no way you could sit through, continued full exam video tape trying to figure out what's going on. Is there maybe a thought of including that in the form that we submit to you guys, just a space for timestamping those videos, like where we could maybe document that might make it a little easier for you guys to see?
So, I'm having all sorts of problems. So if in any of the questions where you can share material with us, specifically 17, and also if you filled out this form in the past and you say, I didn't see that, you're right, it wasn't there. We learned the hard way that we needed to ask. And so we've also been we've been trying to rise to meet the needs. And so now we say, if you're submitting material, can you please share the timestamp with us? And that's in number 17. And then if that goes to an appeal, if the student chooses to appeal, then I will share that with the full AIC. Because unless the student appeals, it's really just me. And then, my pleasure. And then I think Lois said, should we record the conversation with the student regarding the report? I'm not sure if I understand. Ooh, Shanaza's here, our new ID. If you want to chime in, please do. I'm very excited to be working with you. I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean if you have like a Zoom call or a Collaborate call with the student to kind of walk them through, here's what the violation was?
I mean, yeah, when we have the conversation with the student about the AIC violation that we think they did, do you want us to record that conversation?
You do not need to, just because if we were face to face and they came to your office hours, you likely wouldn't record that. My suggestion would be, and this is kind of how the AIC has turned me into a more cynical person, is that I email the student after the meeting and say, hey, just as a reminder, this is what we spoke about on, January 13th on the Zoom call. This is what we agreed to. This is what I shared with you. And that gives the student a chance to correct anything. They might say, no, that's not what I understood, or that's not what I thought the meeting was about. And that your perceptions may not be aligned, but it does give you a chance to offer in writing, hey, this is how I see what happened. This is how the conversation went. Gives them a chance to answer, or gives you a chance to confirm. And Lisa is saying the timestamps are different on the video. Yes, they are. So they may say like 5:30 p.m. for you all, but for what the AIC needs is during the video, it's at minute 45 of the video, not what time was it in the world. And that's also been a source of confusion, and I can maybe clarify that in the forms. Lisa's also suggesting that you could record your screen as you review the honor lock video of the student, so you don't have to try to match up the different timestamps. That's also true. I know that Mercer does not have the kind of dual screen where you have the video with the webcam picture of the student. So you'll either have what's captured on the screen, or the webcam of the student. You don't have those two things side by side, and matching those up has kind of proved onerous. And I would like all of us to have, you know, lives that are as easy as possible. So maybe screen capping is the way to go for that. And then Cynthia said that in forms give instructions on how to use things such as SharePoint, which I will say thank you for that segue. So at the end of the slides that I'm going to share today, here's the one-page tutorial that OneDrive has shared with us. So that kind of teaches you how to download, how to share, all of that's there. And again, I'm going to ask Jill to share that in whatever comments are below the video where she shares this on YouTube, so that you can have that. And if you need that, Cynthia, I can email that to you. I think I have it saved from one of the courses I went to this summer.
Yeah, I'd like that too, please.
Absolutely. All right, so it is 12:58. I'm going to end because I see my esteemed colleagues are here and they are going to teach us about teaching our students to read, I believe. And I think I saw an earlier version of this presentation and it was awesome. So I'm excited for us all to see it again. All right, have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.